and namaste, everyone. I'm happy to be here. Always a joy to discuss and, explore the differences and the similarities of yoga in general with life. But tonight we're going to be exploring the differences in yoga therapy and Ayurveda. Let me begin just a minute. I think I have I want to start, if you don't mind, with the comparison lecture. So give me a second, please. In general, bring an openness and an awareness to exploring this together. And if we know each other, that usually facilitates a better climate for understanding, listening, and sharing. I've been practicing and studying yoga since I was 17, which was nearly 41 years ago. I started really with an exploration of the philosophies of yoga, also things like dream yoga, and I incorporated my really unsatiable appetite for Vedic philosophy with things like the psychological aspects of dream theory and Freudian dream theory. Well, some 30 years later, I was lucky enough to start my Ayurveda journey and practiced, or rather began learning from very wonderful teachers, including, of course, Manjalali, and later became a graduate of the School of Ayurveda. And from that, I'd like to say that my exploration or my learning that took place through Manjalali really did facilitate a greater grasp of how yoga and Ayurveda really could come together to be one system. For me, yoga and Ayurveda are not separate at all. To me, they're just another way to bring healing to the mind, the body, and the spirit. So that being said, I would like to begin with this exploration of Ayurveda and other health modalities. This comparison, I think, will give you not only a greater understanding of, yoga and Ayurveda, but more importantly, a greater understanding of the self, which is what I believe one of the goals is of yoga, of course, is to explore the self. Oftentimes when we're in a yoga therapy session, for instance, we aren't able to initially explore all avenues of yoga therapy and or Ayurveda with the client, because the client may not be ready to assimilate some of the practices. For instance, even though mantra is an essential part of the practice of yoga, many people feel very uncomfortable using mantra for an exploration of healing. So we have to really approach the client at on the path that they're on. You know, we can't take into account where we are in our practice. We have to really accommodate our clients. And so with that said, I normally start classes that I'm teaching yoga or yoga therapy, Ayurveda. I normally start just with an intention setting. And oftentimes that intention setting, that mantra, is said in Sanskrit. And just for tonight, I thought it would be a good idea that we take a different approach. Many people are new to Sanskrit that are in this path of yoga therapy and Ayurveda. And many people may feel uncomfortable even hearing the different Sanskrit. To me, it's gorgeous. To me, I love it. You know, it's part of, again, just the natural arrangement of the Vedic sciences. But in order to me, to everyone, at a stage that is complete. In other words, in order to meet you on the path of equal mindedness, I thought it would be important to meet in our, maybe I'd say, preferred language or most used language, which for all of us here tonight is going to be English. So with that said, I'd like to take just one moment then to acknowledge that we are all on this path together. Take a moment to silence your mind and remind yourself that when we silence the cacophony, the noise around us, we're able to respond, react in ways that are more calm, more focused, more clear. When we have this capacity to respond in ways that are more peaceful and kind, respond in a way that are more acknowledging of the other person, that is when we're able to begin to help others, to facilitate, if you will, healing. And so with that, we begin our practice. So this comparison then begins with the objectives in this class to compare Ayurveda to Ashtanga Yoga, or the 8-limbed yoga system, traditional alternative medicine or acupuncture, traditional Chinese medicine, acupuncture, and other modalities. We'll look at the comparisons, the differences, the philosophies, and origins of each. And then we'll take a look at how the practices can be complementary. Ashtanga Yoga, or the 8-limb yoga, and Ayurveda are said to be sister sciences. Remember that an Ashtanga Yoga really is Hatha Yoga, all yoga that uses force. In other words, even gravity uses the physical body is Hatha Yoga. So even though we're delineating Ashtanga as separate from Hatha, it isn't in the truest sense. But for tonight, we're going to take a look at these sister sciences and look at how these ancient Indian philosophies both have these beautiful divine roots, and both really, I believe, have more in common than they have differences. The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali are really what defined yoga. Remember, the Yoga Sutras, if you haven't read them yourself, are 196 aphorisms with, 4 different chapters or padas, feet they call them, 4 different sections. These aphorisms really are how we are to attain bliss. Bliss being the main aim of the practice of yoga. In yoga, we know that this union of the soul, or the union of the soul with the divine, can be one of its goals. The Yoga Sutras and Yoga of Patanjali is a dualist philosophy. In other words, there is a higher entity outside of the self, outside of the individual. So there's room for a divine entity. If we acknowledge this, we can also acknowledge that one of the reasons yoga has thrived and permeated cultures beyond Indian cultures is because there's also room for a non-dualist philosophical approach to yoga. And that is contained mainly in the Upanishads, where there is an essence meaning you, the individual, that is not separate from the universal essence. In that respect, it means that if I am love, everyone around me is love, and there's no separateness. The only way to achieve a union with the divine in the Upanishadic sense is to be that. And this is where we get the idea of Om Tat Sat. I am that. I am the essence of love. I am the essence of, well, what are you the essence of, I might ask. And so this is where we start to define and understand not only who we are, but who the whole of the universe is, and how we can connect with the whole of the universe through our own actions. So in this sister science paradigm, we can also look at the Ayurveda. This is one of the 4 Vedas, or the 4 knowledge books, I'll say, or the books of knowledge. The Ayurveda was, I believe, the 4th of the main 4 Vedas, the last of them. And it really is concerned with how we live our everyday life. So this is very interesting, isn't it? How do we live our everyday life? Well, we were just talking about the Upanishadic theory or philosophy of walking the walk, so to speak, in order to gain enlightenment, in order to gain a union with the divine, in order to gain a union with really the whole of the universe, meaning that there's no separateness between any of the entities within the universe. There's no separateness within nature, animals. All things are connected. All of the cosmos are connected. This is a beautiful concept, and it's an important concept to move forward in this comparison of Yoga and Ayurveda. In addition, we should pay account to the Brihatrayi, which is, well, the great triad of information, so to speak, on Ayurveda, the Charaka Samhita, Sushruta Samhita, and also the Ashteya Samhita. So the Charaka Samhita, of course, is really going to be a big guide for you on this journey of Ayurveda, because it speaks of many of the ailments and how to cure them. The Sushruta, of course, is more of the surgical methods and modalities for healing. If we think of Arya or Ayu as a conjunction of the body, the mind, and the soul, and Ayu being life and its essence, we can think that there is no life without this amalgamation. There is no life without this melding of body, mind, and soul. So I'm going to take a moment to let you just ponder this for a moment. If we look at yoga as being both an action that helps us to unite with divine, with divinity in general, and we also look at it as a way to yoke with all entities, to yoke with all of the energy in the universe, then we know that this angle, this philosophy, helps us to live a life that is of sound body, mind, and soul. So breaking down the Ashtanga Yoga and Ayurveda into the goals and guidelines for living, we'll look at first the first two limbs of yoga, known as the yamas, or the moral observances, and the niyamas, or the lifestyle practices. The 5 yamas are ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, and aparigraha. Ahimsa, of course, is nonviolence. We can think of nonviolence as being nonviolence in our thoughts, our words, and our actions, reminding you that nonviolence should also be something that we practice towards ourselves, not just towards others. Satya, or truthfulness, can be a way of exploring not only didactic truth, or what is known as truth, knowledge, but also truthfulness within your own spiritual practice. Asteya, or non-stealing, can be practiced in many ways on a day-to-day observance. You can think of asteya even as keeping your senses controlled and not wanting to hoard other people's, well, I can think of this in the practice of yoga, for instance. If you're looking at someone else's practice, you're stealing their practice. Brahmacharya, or celibacy, we might even think of this as more of sense control. Celibacy in this day and age is, well, it's not as easy to practice as it was maybe in an ashram, or maybe back in more traditional times. In this day and age, brahmacharya may be simply the practice of controlling your senses, not saying things even that are hurtful. I know this contains a method of ahimsa, but it also has the method of being able to control yourself, in the same sense that you have to control yourself to be celibate. Aparigraha, non-greed, not wanting more than you are given. This could be practicing a life that isn't greedy. This could be not going out and buying 10 pairs of shoes, only having the shoes that you need, this sort of thing. In order to live in accordance with the yamas, it said that cleansing the astral channels helps you to gather not only the life force with a clean awareness, but also it'll help you to direct prana towards health and spirituality. The channels, these nadis, can be viewed as 3 general ones. Remember, there are about 72,000 different nadis, they say. These nadis, or channels, can be purified through different actions. We're going to talk about these 3 different channels being purified today. 3 of the 72,000 I was talking about. Remember that central channel, Sushumna Nadi, the left and the right channel, Ida and Pingala. And these channels really, without going into too much of the philosophy of these channels and the spiritual connotations of them, they can be cleared through sattvic mind, through sattvic actions, through balanced actions. This, to me, is more important than any other action that we may partake in as practitioners of Ayurveda or yoga. When we can direct our own intentions, direct our own consciousness to a sattvic and balanced lifestyle, Then we can direct prana towards health and to higher spiritual awareness. To me, this sounds a lot like Ayurveda. In Ayurveda, controlling, well, what we eat, what we take in through our senses, all of this is an important function, our daily rituals. If we don't control our daily rituals, we're likely to go out of balance. So for me, the yamas in Ayurveda are very much the same. The niyamas, or these lifestyle practices, sausha, cleanliness, santosha, contentment, tapas, austerity, or doing something that creates heat or friction. Oftentimes, the spiritual study or svadhyaya, the studies of the Veda or the self, will create tapas or heat, this friction in of itself. Ishvara pranidhan, or the surrendering to a higher source, is an important application as well. When we're able to surrender to not only a higher entity outside of ourselves, but surrender to the knowledge of health in of itself, will lead us to health. To me, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Then we are able to not only direct and channel prana to the chakras, the energy centers of the body, but I believe we can cultivate a purer consciousness, a purer vitality and essence. So these yamas and niyamas are very crucial, aren't they? Not only to the study of yoga, but I think you can begin to see now that they also directly influence how we practice Ayurveda. So there are 4 types of ayu or life. It keeps the pancha koshas clear, or the sheaths clear, the 5 sheaths. They help alleviate the 3 kleshas. The kleshas being the I'm trying to blank on kleshas, but I know Manju will help me with that. This helps us live a karmically positive lifestyle. Our dinacharya we spoke of a moment ago. And when we live harmoniously with nature, when we live harmoniously in a routine that is correct for our prakriti, we begin to live in a way that is healthy. Dinacharya, of course, takes into account our nutrition. I believe that our nutrition is directly related to ahimsa, nonviolence. When we eat healthfully, we are kind to our body. When we eat unhealthfully, well, of course, that is a violent act to our own body, mind, and spirit. Our seasonal observances, just living in accordance with the seasons, helps to alleviate and prevents disease on a body, mind, and soul level. So if we were to take the whole of these slides, and to be honest, we could talk about each of these little aspects within this one slide for many hours. But if we think of the yamas, the niyamas, ritucharya, dinacharya, the koshas and the kleshas, if we think of this as just awareness building, I think we'll have a much better time and may not become overwhelmed by the whole concept of living within Ayurvedic and yogic terms. If we can think of striving to become more aware of our choices, more aware of our words, more aware of our actions, we naturally fall in line, naturally fall in order with yoga and Ayurveda. In the practice of the 8 limbs of yoga, asanas are used to balance the doshas. For Vata, this means practicing in a quiet, grounded, systematic way. The Hatha Yoga Pradipika says we should never practice in a place that is dirty, outdoors, with a lot of wind. This would definitely be true for the Vata. I know in this day and age, there are a lot of yoga practices that are outdoors. I myself taught many classes at the beach. I've even taught yoga in a swimming pools. So we can look at this in a way that is traditional in fashion. I would never be able to, if I followed the Hatha Yoga Pradipika to the nth, well, I wouldn't have been able to teach those classes or even suggest to some people that they practice outdoors. For some people, practicing outdoors is the only way they can practice. So I believe malleability is extremely important to yoga and Ayurveda. One of the favorite things I like to recount that my husband says is, he says, it's not a Sith practice. The Siths from Star Wars. It's one way or no way. Remember, yoga is malleable to the individual, and for yoga therapy, that can't be expressed enough. So this practice for the Vata would include matching the breath to the poses. In my view, I believe matching the breath to the poses should always take place, not just for Vata. The breath may be held longer. If you hold the breath longer on the exhale, that'll be too cooling for a Vata. So it's important that if you do hold the breath, that it's on the inhale. Surya Namaskar, or the sun salutation, should be slow. Navasana, the boat pose, and Savasana, relaxation pose, are just a few examples for Vata. Pitta practice may include forward bends and twists. I often, with yoga therapy, don't like to give forward bends, mostly because people, 99% of people, even those that are experienced practitioners, do not perform forward bends correctly. There is great propensity for harm to the sacroiliac area and also the lumbar area if you do forward bends incorrectly. So I just prefer not to give forward bends for yoga therapy, although they are beneficial in many ways. Twists can be very dangerous. For this reason, I do not give standing twists, but rather twists where you're lying down are more beneficial. Since the seat of Pitta is in the mid-belly, and since anger, the liver, and so forth are cleansed with twists, this would be a natural thing for Pitta dosha. Practicing in an effortless, non-goal-oriented way is much easier said than done, isn't it? But of course, this is the goal for the Pitta dosha. Moon salutations, or beginning salutations on the left side instead of the right, like Surya Namaskara B. These are all here then good poses for Pitta dosha. The Kapha dosha, it's going to be difficult to give the Kapha dosha energetic practice. They won't want to do the practice. If you give too much of an energetic practice to Kapha, they just plain old won't do it. So I think it's a good idea to have some standing postures. 1 to 3 postures would be a good idea. Head and handstand should really never be done unless prepared for. In other words, head and handstands should only be done if there are preparatory poses, inversions and back bends as well. Forward bends will increase kapha, so hold for less time. Again, I'm not real happy to give forward bends as a yoga therapy. Surya Namaskara should be faster. Oftentimes, kapha can't perform Surya Namaskara because of the girth associated with the kapha dosha. A warrior 1, 2, or 3 would be very good positions because it's standing pose. And Vrikshasana, the tree pose, another wonderful alternative. So Ashtanga Yoga and Ayurveda both use asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana for health of the physical body and balancing the mind. Postures, of course, are used to balance the doshas, promote health and vitality, and for the treatment of disease and spiritual development. Moksha, or liberation, is the goal of Ayurveda 4 pillars, and Samadhi is the goal of Ashtanga Yoga. Ayurveda and traditional Chinese medicine, acupuncture.
So Devi, this is Manjalali. We kind of short on time today because it's only a 1.5 hour class. Do you want to finish this presentation tomorrow for the group when they have their first class?
And you would like me to go on to
the yoga therapy. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. And also, there was a question that I don't know how to answer. It was Kavita. She was asking, I think this was related to a Pitta person. Kavita ji, what was your question? That Pitta should inhale and hold the breath for a long time and then exhale? Oh, Vata person. So what is the inhalation and exhalation process for a Vata person?
Well, if we think of this, if on the in-breath, on different parts of, for instance, if someone has a liver issue, I like to, and say they're having back pain or stomach pain, or let's even use kidney, because kidney might be a little easier to explain because everyone knows where the kidneys are on the back, and oftentimes kidney pain can be directly related, attributable, and a source for back pain. But oftentimes it isn't. So how do we differentiate? This is a beautiful question. What I like doing, of course, is first and foremost, we have to assess the physical body. So we have to see what the range of motion is. And so to assess the physical body, we have to see what the range of motion. If we look at the spine and the range of motion that the spine has, the lumbar spine has the biggest range of motion other than the neck, but it has a very big range of motion. Someone that cannot create that natural lordosis or that natural curve in their back when they're just standing, already this is going to tell you they have poor form, and this may be contributing to their pain. So we look at the physical body. Do they walk with that kyphotic posture, maybe dragging their heels? This will tell you then, of course, then the spine is in poor alignment. Do they have a saggy belly? weak muscles in the belly are going to be one of the first signs for a back ailment, right? So this is what I look at first. I look at that physical posturing, and this happens when they first walk in the door. I can see it. Aside from that, when they come onto the table, to the examination table, I have a massage table that I have a beautifully infused amethyst mat on it, infused with 40 pounds of amethyst crystals. And so they lie on that. And I began to use marma, and I invigorate the kidney area with marma. And oftentimes people will have pain in that area if it's a kidney ailment. Of course, what you're going to be learning throughout your course is how to differentiate kidney ailments. You'll also be able to look at the tongue, the eyes, under the eyes. You'll be able to ask questions about the urine. But here we're just talking about, how do I know bad posture pain and organ issues? First, you differentiate whether their posture is horrible. Are they walking with an exaggerated curve in their back or no curve in their back? Are they walking with their feet out or turned inward? That's going to be a key sign. Then you want to look at their belly muscles. Is their belly really weak? And then I move them on the table. I go through 2 or 3 different yoga postures. For instance, I do an assisted pigeon pose. I do an assisted cow face pose. I do an assisted one leg dead bug or happy baby. And if they can't accomplish those, with my help, of course, they're lying flat on the table. That tells me it's probably postural. As an Ayurveda practitioner, I also, of course, then go into a methodic, not diagnosis, but criteria for figuring out whether it's kidney related as well. But this goes beyond the course of what I'm going to teach tonight, but you'll know what those methods are too when you're finished. So first impression, how a person is walking, their gait, their curvature of the spine. We will do some of that in the July workshop. That's right. Anyone else have any questions? That was a beautiful, wonderful question. But it is the first impression. The minute that person walks through the door, usually they tell you, I'd like to make an appointment with you because I've been having bad back pain. And I see them walk from the parking lot, or I see them walk up my hallway, and I've already taken a look at everything. I know whether they're predominant dosha. The minute they speak, I know things, the way they're batting their eyes, all of it. So it really is a beautiful process, but it's an important process, and I'm glad you asked the question. But remember, always look at structural, and then, move through the Ayurvedic darshanam. And then you also want to look at the energetic. And that's why I use marma points extensively in my practice. Anything else? Okay, there's some reading to assign that Manjulali is going to put up. Why do you use the amethyst crystal mat? So amethyst are the most, I won't say the most, it's hard to differentiate the most with the use of crystals in general. They're all so lovely. But amethyst is very cleansing. As a matter of fact, you can put other crystals beside or on or near an amethyst, and they will be cleansed. So I use the amethyst crystal because it is very cleansing. Aside from that, when they are heated, it's within a heated mat, they emit far infrared. So they actually get a far infrared session as well. So it really is just a beautiful thing. I use jade and tourmaline mat at home. Yeah, there probably are a lot of different mats that you can use. And I think it's a great way to incorporate a very gentle, natural cleanse, and a very great way to facilitate a cleansing process without much effort. So amethyst is just my favorite. Tourmaline for me can be a little too grounding, and for kapha individuals, I don't think that would be the best. But will be a yoga path to start for beginners like you. For beginners like you, a good path to start is awareness. I think being open to journal writing and looking at different ways that you're speaking, listening. How are you being kind? How are you being angry? These kinds of things, your daily actions. This is yoga practice in itself. Yoga practice isn't, let me do 10 back bends and 50 headstands. Yoga practice is how do you relate to those around you? And so creating a journal is a good yoga practice. If you really want to do a yoga practice, asana practice, I think the best yoga asana, yoga postures is Dvipada Viparita Karini, 2 legs up the wall pose. It's good for all doshas and it balances so many things. So I would say practice 2 legs up the wall every night for a minute. And if you do it every night for a minute for 30 days, come back to me and I'll give you another pose. Assisted pigeon and half baby pose, and this to assess the range of motion, pinpoint where the pain is. Yes, so think of assisted pigeon. They're lying on their back, their knee is bent on one leg, and the other leg is up like in a figure 4. Then I move in and gently kind of pull on the leg that's in the figure 4, and that'll give them, sometimes they'll be really tight. The range of motion will not be very big for the external hip rotators. And if the external hip rotators are tight, that's one of the first signs for people with back pain. External hip rotators, hip flexors, and abdominals. So half baby pose. This also stretches the lumbar and the sacroiliac area, sacroiliac joint. And so if they can't accomplish this, this is telling me that the hamstrings, the gluteus maximus, minimus, the erector spinae are too tight. So these are the 2 poses. These are my go-to poses. And cow face, where they cross their legs. And when I say push can be a dirty word in yoga. I just mean gently apply pressure. So cow face pose also assesses the tightness on the external hip rotators, gluteus minimus, and really targets the piriformis, which is one of the first to go bad for sciatic nerve pain. So those are the 3 things I use, and it helps me. Anyone else? Any other questions? Well, I love yoga therapy.
I just want to say, Sudevi is my yoga teacher, and once you've been to her class, she completely spoils you. You can never go to anyone else.
Oh.
She's she's a master teacher. If you're ever in New Mexico, Santa Fe, New Mexico, go to her class. She's amazing. It'll open worlds for you guys. Really, it's beautiful.
Sweet. I appreciate that. I mostly appreciate all of you listening and being so active in the chat. That's a wonderful thing that you have so many questions. It really helps facilitate the learning process. And so with that,